So let's talk about cognition, about your thoughts. So we certain situations we tend to think cause emotion. So for example, we might say something like, when my stop loss gets hit, I feel angry or something like that. But the reality is, it isn't the emotions that cause, I'm sorry, it isn't the situation that causes the emotion. It's our interpretation of the situation. So, how we think about a situation is really what causes the emotion, not the situation itself. So, just like I've said before, in the past, I had a string of losses. I was just fine. A couple weeks later, I had a string of losses again, same number. I think it was 4 in a row. And the second time, I was really upset about it. So, even though I had already had that same experience, um, I was thinking about it differently. I was attributing, for some reason, I don't honestly know what was going on in my life or in my head that was different, but how I was perceiving 4 losers in a row was different. So it's not the situation that causes the emotion, it's how we think about a situation that causes an emotion. And this is, trading related, but it can be outside of trading as well. Um, but how you interpret the situation, the meaning, that's what causes the emotion. However, I will also say emotions are completely involuntary. Um, they are automatic and they're natural and biological. So when you experience an emotion, it's not just a feeling, okay? There are changes in your body and your brain that are associated with the emotion. And so you can attempt to control an emotion, but really an emotion is going to happen whether you try to control it or not. When you try to control your emotions, you're likely to feel frustrated. But recognizing that emotions are normal, they're natural, they serve a purpose, can really help you manage them a little bit better. And also gives you some, I want to say control, but it's not control. It gives you some management opportunities over the emotion. So in my head, I always visualize the emotion having like a knob that I'm just turning the volume down on it a little bit. So it's fine that you feel angry when somebody cuts you off, but maybe just turn it down a little bit. And by the way, that's not an emotion that I am particularly successful personally at managing well. But we all have our strengths and weaknesses in this, and the more we can um, gain access and gain mastery over those emotions, the better off we are. So we will never fully control them, we'll not eliminate them, but we can become masterful over them. So again, how you think about a situation is what produces the emotion. So for me, hearing ICT talk about a stop loss, getting your stop loss hit, that's your insurance policy. And getting the stop loss hit basically is, you're enacting your insurance policy. And that's it. That's all it is. That is a way of conceptualizing a situation or thinking about a situation in a totally different way. Likewise, if you were, let's say you were in traffic and somebody cut you off, and you very potentially could be pretty upset about it. You might think, oh my gosh, I have my kids in the car. That's so dangerous. What a jerk. You would be likely to have some type of negative emotion around that. If somebody in your passenger seat turns and looks behind and says, oh my gosh, that person's car was on fire, that thought would change how you perceive being cut off, right? So it would change things for you mentally, and you probably wouldn't be necessarily upset that they cut you off because now you have the idea, the thinking that there was a reason for it. So again, being stopped out, you might think, I'm a failure. I don't know what I'm doing. The market is against me. And that could cause a negative emotion versus if you think, well, it's a stop, the stop loss is just, part of it. It makes it much easier to control. Okay. So Oh, thank you, legends. I'm so glad you like the psychology lectures. That's awesome. I love thinking about psychology too. All right. So, in between the situation and the emotion is where the thinking comes in, right? So, even though it might happen, you might experience an emotion momentarily, it might happen instantly. There is a space between the situation occurring and your emotion where you can tune into and pay attention to your thoughts. It might honestly even come after you experience the emotion. So, you could have a situation, let's say your stop loss getting hit, you could have an instant emotional reaction. Maybe you're angry or frustrated or upset. But then, even after that, you can take the time, either preemptively or after the fact, to tune into your thoughts and think about what thoughts you have going into the situation. All right. How we think about a situation directly impacts how we feel. And because emotions cannot be controlled, we cannot control our emotions, prevent our emotions, stop our emotions. We can only manage them. What we do have very easy access to is our thoughts, because our thinking is very accessible and it's very easy to control. And you might not be surprised to hear, if let's say you're just having a bad day and you tune into your thoughts, chances are it's pretty negative in your head. On the other hand, when you're having a good day, it might sound pretty happy, birds chirping, just a good place to be. But when you're having a bad day, if you deliberately focus on saying, okay, it is what it is, let me think, how can I think positively? There's plenty of research that shows the power of your mind and the power of positive thinking. And we can apply those exact same things to trading. Even if in the moment, at the moment, it doesn't feel real. So I can't ever think of a time when I've gotten stopped out of a position and thought, oh, good, I've been stopped out. Of course, we don't think that way. But you really can say, well, I understand that's my insurance policy. And you might even feel not great about it. So you might use your body physically to send a message to your brain that it's okay, even if it's not really something that you're pleased about. So, smiling, for example, that's something that we talk about a lot. That changes the chemistry in your brain. Just a smile, even if it's a forced smile, even if it's a fake smile, your brain does not know the difference. All right. If you've heard me talk about this before, I absolutely love the movie Inside Out. Such a great movie. Oops, am I not on the right slide yet? Yes, I am. Such a great movie. Talks all about the emotions and talks about the value of the emotions, and also sort of the what's the word I'm looking for? The discrepancy, maybe, between the emotions. So if you always feel joy, right? If you never experienced any other emotion, you would basically be acclimated to that experience of joy, and it would lessen sort of the impact of your experience of joy, right? And so not only that, but emotions serve a purpose, right? For example, fear fear helps us be safe. If you have no fear, you're likely to do things that are going to cause yourself to be in danger. So think of a small child. A small child has no fear. They'll touch a hot stove without knowing, this could really, really hurt me. They'll run into traffic without realizing, gosh, that's pretty dangerous. They'll go into an open body of water without recognizing that this is a dangerous situation. Maybe they can't swim. Okay. So fear helps us to recognize danger, and it's normal and natural for us to experience fear. But again, how we think about a situation, that's what causes the emotion. And um, an emotion that is typical for traders is fear and like the stress response. Okay. All right. Let's talk for a second about automatic negative thoughts. Just try to advance my slides as we go. Automatic negative thoughts. So, focusing on the negative piece of it. These are involuntary habitual thoughts. We talked about habit on Monday during Mindset Monday. Habitual thoughts that focus on negatives, they exaggerate problems or predict disaster. So, if you're anything like me, we've all been in situations where we think, oh my gosh, the world is coming to an end. Everything's wrong. Everything feels terrible. Even for me, sometimes in the winter, it's just like I haven't seen the sun for a bit, and boy, everything's wrong, right? So the impact of automatic negative thoughts, though, is really profound. It can distort your perspective, it can trigger even stronger emotions, influence behavior in harmful ways. And that's part of the reason why we start the mindset warm up, doing the relaxation, the box breathing, but also smiling. As silly as it seems and as silly as it feels to be smiling just for the heck of it, the idea is we're attempting to tell our brain, you know what? I feel happy. I feel optimistic. And that can really help combat some of this automatic negative thinking. It is not useful and helpful to us as traders to get in a place where we are feeling negative, where we are thinking negatively. It's normal and natural for that to happen, but it's not serving us. So anything that we can do to combat that, to change that, is really, really important. Even my son is a competitive lacrosse player, and he uses these same methods in order to help himself um, go to a game, prepare for a tournament in a way that is positive, right? He puts in his hard work all outside of the game time, but sometimes you get in a game and mentally you really, really struggle. And so by smiling, by doing the relaxation, just like we do as traders, we can really set ourselves up for success in a way um, that is sort of preemptive, instead of having to do the work after we've taken the losses. And we'll still take losses, but if we can avoid that automatic negative thought cycle, we are much more likely to be in a better situation. So automatic negative thoughts, not only can they influence our behavior in harmful ways, change our perspective, impact the strength of the emotions we experience, but they can also lead us to miss opportunities and make poor decisions. And so that creates a vicious cycle where we're sort of, I know I've experienced this myself, where I kind of maybe take a few losses and it was fine. It was part of my trading plan, but it starts to get to your head a little bit. And then pretty soon, not only are you taking losers, but you're also making mistakes. And then those mistakes really start to mess with your head a little bit. And then, maybe you get scared to take a trade, and then that trade ends up being a winner. And it all kind of culminates in this really, really awful um, negative thought loop that is really, really important to get out of, so that you're not feeling overwhelmed, so that you're not feeling helpless and hopeless. Okay. All right. I love this picture here. Let me get my slides over here. So, isn't that cool? Um, You might be surprised to know that when someone has depression, somebody is experiencing just depression, and it could even be an acute experience of depression. So maybe not somebody who is been chronically depressed, but maybe they're going through a divorce, or a loved one passed away, or something like that that comes on acutely. When somebody experiences depression, there are actual physical structures in the brain that shrink. So um, that can be seen on modern imaging, that the certain structures in the brain shrink. But when you change the way you think, you can actually change the chemical and physical structure of the brain. So we know that the brain is kind of more plastic. It's called plasticity, more plastic than scientists used to believe. Basically, when I don't know when this changed exactly, but the thinking had been that around the age of like 3 or 4, the changes in your brain basically slowed down to next to nothing. You had basically, that's why learning language was more difficult. The older you were more likely to have an accent if you learn a new language, that kind of thing. But now we know modern imaging, through the benefit of modern imaging, that the brain is plastic, has plasticity, and it can change depending on how you think and actually how you act. Okay, so here's the term plasticity. When the ability of the nervous system to change its activity in response to intrinsic and extrinsic stimuli by reorganizing its structure, functions, or connections. That's the definition of plasticity. And intrinsic means internal stimuli, and extrinsic is external stimuli. So the ability of the nervous system, that's your brain, your whole nervous system, to change its activity in response to intrinsic, so internal, or extrinsic, external stimuli by reorganizing its structure, functions, or connections. So how you think and act is really, really important. And how you think and act not only has an impact on your sort of like mental experience, but it also causes actual chemical changes in the brain. So again, we've talked about this many times before. The power pose, the 2-minute power pose that we start the mindset warm up with. If you are not familiar with the scientific research behind that and you'd like to know more, I have many videos that go into detail on why we're doing that exact thing. In 2 minutes, that type of pose, so standing in a position of power or confidence, or sitting in a position of power or confidence, in only 2 minutes can actually chemically change your brain. In this particular scenario, it increases testosterone, that's the dominance hormone, and it decreases cortisol, that's the stress hormone. So, for example, I had kind of mentioned special forces people in the military town that we lived in before we moved here. And not only do they just exude like just badness, like they're just like, I don't know, they just have an aura about them that is just so interesting and so fascinating. And a big part of it is they are sort of this odd combination of power and dominance, but also just cool, calm, chill, just what you would want in a powerful leader, or in if I'm going to be in a foreign country that's under attack, I want somebody like the special forces to come rescue me, right? Because they are powerful, they're aggressive, they're dominant, but they also stay cool under pressure, calm and collected under pressure. And that's what we're really looking for as traders. And that's why we do the power pose. So in addition to how we think and act, on the wrong slide here. Okay, so we talked about the chemical changes, but again, also physical changes. So the physical changes, that's like I mentioned, how people with depression, there's actual physical changes, so shrinkage in certain parts of the brain related to the depression. And so there's a connection between our mind and body. I'm sure you've heard this many times before, and it goes beyond just what we do as traders on the charts, but how we eat, how we sleep, how we move. So talking about physical fitness, and how you relax. So for me, I don't know, I like to eat what I want to eat, but the relax piece is probably the hardest for me. Naturally, I'm not a relaxed person. I like to multitask. I like to be busy. Kind of type A personality. It's not my forte to relax and chill out. So by the way, if you were watching my trade earlier, or my potential trade, I have canceled the limit order. Prices completely got away from the area that I was looking at. So I'll go ahead and cancel it as we're talking. So when we're looking at the mind-body connection, the importance of eat, how you sleep, how you move, so meaning exercise, but also even things that we don't always think about exercise is like even just walking. Hopefully you think of walking as exercise, but moving your body, really, really important, but also how you relax. After I have a hard time in the market, my relaxation piece is really, really important. And that can be even just walking the dogs, you know, taking out my AirPods, turning off the sounds, reading a book, just being quiet, just thinking, just chilling out. And speaking of that, how you think is really, really key, really, really critical. And this is an area that can be really tough, especially as traders, because we, of course, need to be thinking, right? But sort of how we think about our beliefs, how we think about ourselves is super, super important as traders. So every day, our minds are flooded with a constant stream of thoughts, ranging from like the mundane daily tasks that we do every day to deeper contemplations about life and the world around us, maybe, the afterlife, religion, philosophy, all kinds of different things. And according to the research, the average person has approximately 60,000 thoughts per day. And many of those are assumptions and anxieties and the automatic negative thoughts that we're talking about. Let me just pop back over here. So, again, assumptions, anxieties, and automatic negative thoughts are part of our many, many anxious thoughts that we have, or part of our many, many thoughts that we have in a day. Okay, so let's talk about the emotion that when I ask traders, what is the emotion that you're most likely to experience when you're in a losing trade? And I'm guessing you could guess what it is. Let me know in the chat. Oh, good. I'm glad you like it, Evelyn. Let me know what you think about is the top emotion that traders say they experience when they're in a losing trade. Anybody guess it? I have a feeling you know. It's fear. Okay. Fear and sort of a variation of fear is anxiety. So, not talking about necessarily clinical anxiety, but sort of that a variant of fear. So, worry, anxiety, uncertainty, those are all sort of variations on of fear. And when we experience anxiety, we experience fear, we're in a situation where we're perceiving the world as a dangerous place. Exactly. Hi, Stephen. Welcome. Thank you, Evelyn. Yes, fear. So when we're perceiving the world as a dangerous place, that is when we're likely to experience anxiety and fear. And again, anxiety and fear is really, really important. It's a really important emotion. Sometimes you want to experience anxiety and fear in trading, right? If you're trading a $50,000 account and you're risking $1,000 per trade, it's probably a good thing if you experience fear, right? Because you really shouldn't be trading risking $1,000 per trade if you have a $50,000 prop firm account. And so sometimes fear and anxiety can be good. It can be sort of a self-correcting, an emotion that helps us sort of self-correct. But of course, sometimes it can get in our way as we're trading. And so this is why ICT's words are so powerful to me, because he talks about, for example, a lot of folks will say when they're taking a losing trade, they experience fear. And the reason is because they might think it means something about them. It might mean that they're failing as a trader. It might have them worried about the status of their account, about the effectiveness of their strategy. There's many, many, many thoughts and beliefs that might be attached to one's fear around having a stop loss hit or taking a losing trade. And if you can replace those ideas with something like ICT's perspective that a stop loss is simply an insurance policy, it can really, really change how you think about that experience. Now, at least as far as I'm concerned, it's not 100% foolproof. Sometimes you may believe that and you may still get your stop loss hit and have a fear reaction. It is normal and natural that you would sometimes experience a stop loss being hit or taking a losing trade as a fear inducing experience. But again, it's not the situation that causes the fear response, it's your interpretation. So if you're starting to notice that as you're taking losing trades, you're having an emotion, it might make sense to look at what are the thoughts behind that. So if you're able typically to take losing trades and say, okay, that's part of trading. Every trader takes losses. This is normal and natural. That's great. And sometimes if you're in a situation where you're taking a loss and you're experiencing fear and anxiety around it, you might want to take a look at your thoughts. What is causing you to think, or what are the thoughts that are causing you to experience the anxiety and the fear? Is it that you're, wondering about your system, or you think it means something about you as a trader, whatever it is? And that can help you to focus on replacing those thoughts with something that is more helpful and conducive to being an effective trader. So this is the stress response in kids. I actually really like this as applicable to traders, even though it's designed to talk about the stress response in kids. I think it's pretty universally applicable. So you've probably heard someone talk about the fight or flight response. Oftentimes when we're in a stressful situation, we will either fight or flee, right? And a lot of times people have a tendency to choose one over the other. So I'll say for me, for myself, for example, I tend to be more of a fighter. My husband, on the other hand, tends to be more of a flight, a flight response. He sort of avoids the conflict, whereas my natural inclination is to fight back. Okay. Again, as traders, this is the exact same thing that we experience. If you're experiencing, let me pop back over here. If you are the type of person who takes a loss and then ends up revenge trading or over trading, that's more like the fight response, right? Your flight, someone who has a flight response, maybe they ignore the losses that are starting to build up, and they continue to dwindle down their P&L, and they just ignore the fact that they're getting really, really close to losing their prop account, for example, or maybe some variation of that. Another one, flight, is if you're someone who tends to move your stop loss. That can be another example of sort of trying to avoid that stress inducing situation. So if a loss is stress inducing, as it is for many, of moving your stop loss is an example of a flight response. And then there's the freeze response. So basically shutting down, inability to act. I've shared this before, where I was at one point, I guess it wasn't all that long ago, I was in a very substantial winning trade. I don't typically take trades that have that large R multiples. I think it was 7R it got up to. And I typically take 2, 3 is like a really, really good R for me, and 4 is like out of the ballpark. And it hit 7R, and I absolutely froze. And I hate to admit it, but it went all the way down into a loss. And I just had an absolute freeze experience. I did nothing. I sat and watched the price go all the way back to my stop, unable to act. That's not a typical response for me, but the idea is any of these stress responses are available to us and can happen to us. And so if you look at how the stress response is listed here, you can see it goes from sort of the lesser examples of fight, for example, onto, as the color gets darker, it shows even more extreme reactions. So really helpful to kind of pay attention to this and think about, where you fit not only in life, but also as a trader. It might be similar and it might be different. I think for myself personally, I tend to fall in my personal life, in my regular life, outside of trading, more into the fight column. As a trader, I would say that's also true, but I also dabble in flight and freeze from time to time. So it's really important to pay attention to these and keep it in mind, like what is causing you to have these behaviors. So on to the next slide here. This is I love this. First of all, if you are interested, Therapy in a Nutshell is a YouTube channel that is just absolutely excellent. It's a huge channel, and it's more focused on there's more kind of clinical side of things, but she also just does a really great job of explaining behavior in general. So you can see her in the upper right hand corner. That's the name of it, Therapy in a Nutshell. It's not as clinical as it sounds, but there is some element of that. So this is her drawing for your healthy nervous system. So let me pop you over to the next slide here. All right. So remember, well, let's just talk through this first. So when we are safe, so starting on the lower left-hand corner, we're generally in a safe situation, right? And then there's some kind of stimulus or something that happens that we eventually interpret as dangerous. Okay, so moving into the center of this diagram here, or not diagram, image here. And then we have the opportunity to have an FFF response. That's the fight, flight, or freeze response. So we can either opt to avoid it or face it. If we avoid it, you get a sense of relief, right? And then the brain reinforces that anxiety. So if you were with us for Mindset Monday, we talked about the power of habit, and it's very similar to that habit loop, where anything that you do, any kind of behavior that you do, has a reward or a reinforcement attached to it, whether you're aware of it or not. For example, imagine having a trade set up. Okay, so you're in safety, you take a trade, you have your stop loss set up, your trade set up, and you're in the trade, and you're interpreting your stop loss getting hit as dangerous. So price starts to come toward your stop loss, and you perceive that as danger, right? The fight, flight, or freeze response, maybe you decide flight. Okay, you want to avoid taking a loss, and so you move your stop further away. In the moment, you feel a bit of relief, right? Whew, my stop almost got hit, but it didn't. Yes, you feel a little bit of relief. Okay, so then your brain reinforces, yes, that is something to be nervous about, something to be anxious about. And not only that, but you get rewarded, right? The reward is the relief that you feel. And so next time you're in that situation, guess what's going to be even easier to do? Maybe the first time you do that, you have a little bit of cognitive dissonance and worry about, oh, I know this is a really bad thing to move your stop. I really shouldn't do that. But you do it, you get the reward, which is relief. And guess what? Next time you're going to have a little bit less conflict about it, right? So that's how these really challenging, really detrimental behaviors as traders can become habits and get reinforced. And so the key is to find a way to interrupt this cycle on the left side of the screen, the anxiety cycle, to interrupt that cycle so that instead of avoiding it or fighting it by revenge trading or over trading, you come to face it, and then you can move to safety from there. So even if your stop loss gets hit, in particular, if you can perceive the stop loss, the experience of a stop loss getting hit as not a dangerous situation, not a threat, then you are in a better situation to accept the loss and move on. So again, remember, it is not the stimulus that causes your fear response. It's your interpretation um, of the stimulus as dangerous. So this is Viktor Frankl. Let me just move my slides ahead here. Viktor Frankl. And if you're familiar with Viktor Frankl, he was an Austrian psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor. He had his entire family killed in the Holocaust. He, as far as I understand, he was the only survivor from his family. So this is powerful. This is amazing. So listen to this. Between stimulus and response lies a space. In that space lie our freedom and power to choose a response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Another interpretation of his words said our happiness. Okay. So between stimulus and response lies a space. So reflect back to, sorry, hope I don't give anyone vertigo here, but think back to this here. Okay. There's the situation and there's the emotion. And then in between the two, there's a space, right? So that's what he's referring to here. Sorry, close your eyes for a second if this makes you dizzy. Between stimulus and response lies a space. In that space lie our freedom and power to choose a response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom or our happiness. You have the freedom and the power to choose what happens in that space. So where your thinking occurs, what you think about, what you pay attention to, where you give your energy to is totally up to you. And you can choose to think whatever you want to think. You can choose to be positive, or you can allow your brain to sort of go naturally to the negative, right? I think left to our own devices, if we don't know better, it's easy in a tough situation to go to the negative. Instead, really choosing to find happiness, to find peace, to talk kindly to ourselves. Those are the things that we have the power to choose to do, whether or not in the moment it feels real or not, right? So after you are in a series of losing trades, it can be very helpful, very powerful to take some time to think about what that means. Obviously, your natural inclination might be to think, it means something about you as a trader. It means something about your system. Maybe you need to change your system or tweak it or something like that. Maybe it's the market. Maybe the market is being difficult. Or you might choose to think something else. This is normal and natural. This is a, tough patch for me. This is a time where maybe I need to pop off the charts a bit. I know I say that and that's exceptionally difficult for me. But maybe there's something else I should be doing off the charts to help sort of wait out this period, right? So this is another model or drawing, conceptualizing of the anxiety cycle. So we have the fear stimulus, intrusive thought or situation that triggers fear. That's the number one. So oftentimes that's for traders, that's often losing, right? Misinterpretation of a threat. So we interpret our loss or our stop loss as threatening. That is why, for example, oftentimes when you're in a losing trade or you're about to get stopped out or your, P&L is getting more and more negative, we perceive that as a threat. And if you don't believe it, think about how you feel in your body and your mind at those times, right? Maybe you notice you're starting to sweat. Maybe your rate of respiration has changed. Maybe your heart rate is increasing. Maybe you are tensing your muscles. That is all your body preparing to act against a threat, just like you would be if you were, let's say you were in New York and you were getting robbed, right? You would have the same type of experience that sensation in your body, the feeling of fear, the thoughts in your mind, right? It's the same type of thing. And that's what leads to the anxiety feeling and the safety seeking behaviors. So, what is important about this is if you're doing a safety seeking behavior, for example, moving your stop loss, getting rid of your stop loss, yes, that will give you a temporary reward. You will feel a temporary sense of relief. However, that is very reinforcing and it becomes a very, very difficult habit to break because it is so powerful to have that reinforcement of, you know, avoiding a loss. Although, of course, we know that what comes after that can be really, really challenging and really detrimental. So, I recommend really thinking about what it means to take a loss, what it means for you personally, and what your beliefs are around what it means to be in a losing trade. For example, if you're familiar, let me see. First, I can't remember what it's called. Give me 1 second here. Okay, here it is. So let me bring you to this here. So if you're in a losing situation, a losing trades where you feel like you're kind of getting beat up by the market, of course, sometimes it's important to take a break, and that's just part of it. But I find this chart really, really helpful as well. Let me put you on here so you can see this. Okay, this is let me make sure this is caught up. Yeah, okay. So this is from FTMO's website. These are all over the internet. I think I just Googled probability of string of losses FTMO. Um, if you have a pretty solid win rate of, let's say, 50%, okay, that's a really nice win rate, 50%. This shows the win percentage on the left and the probability of seeing at least X consecutive losing trades within a 50 trade period on the top. So if I have a 50% win rate, I have a 97% chance of experiencing six losing trades in a row. 97%. That's almost guaranteed at some point that I will experience a six consecutive losses in a row. I have a 15.5% of having 8 in a row. Okay. So I know earlier Paw Trade was talking about having a substantial number of losing trades in a row. But look at this, that 8 in a row, if you have anything below a 40% win rate, you have an extremely high percentage of having 8 in a row. But even if you have a 45% win rate or a 50% win rate, you still have a pretty decent chance, 30% and 15.5%. And I think we tend to think, at least I tend to think, if I'm getting too many losers in a row, it starts to be really, really nerve wracking. And that's why it can be very helpful to assume that you may at some point take 20 losses in a row and calculate your risk based on that. It is possible that you could have 20 losses in a row, even in a very effective system, and nothing be wrong. Now, of course, it's pretty low. So if you look at 50% win rate, 11 in a row is 1.9%. So it's pretty unlikely that it would happen, but it could happen. If you wanted to be a little bit more aggressive, you could say, 10 instead. But having a large number of losses is plausible in any system. And then we add ourselves into the mix, right? Even though we're trying to operate consistently time in, time and time again, it just doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes we introduce some kind of variability into the trading system. And so think about this chart when you are feeling defeated by the market. Yes, sometimes you will need a break, and sometimes that's the right thing for you to do. But the reality is, I mean, even with a 70% win rate, which I think is pretty extreme, pretty high, you have a 10% chance of 5 losers in a row. I don't know about you, but 5 definitely in a row would get me unnerved. I've had it before, and it definitely gets me a little bit nervous, right? But even with 70% win rate, you have a 10% chance of getting 5 in a row. So I hope that helps. I would really, really encourage you, if you are struggling in this market, if you're struggling with yourself, if you're struggling and you're not sure why, to really, really take a look at your thoughts and how your thoughts are impacting you as a trader. What could you focus on and think about that would change, kind of your experience of being a trader? Let me just pop over to one more thing here. We have let's see. Just taking a second here to think. So remembering, if you have not watched this, I did a 3-part series on inside the mind of a successful trader. And this is really, really important. So trading psychology is your thoughts and your beliefs and your emotions, or sometimes people talk about it as your feelings. Okay. So it's not consistency. It's not discipline. It's none of the things that YouTubers talk about. It's your thoughts and your emotions, your thoughts and beliefs, your emotions and your feelings. That's what trading psychology is. And that's what psychology is. Trading psychology is thoughts, beliefs, emotions, and feelings related to your trading activities and yourself as a trader. So, your trading psychology really impacts your behavior and your performance. And for most traders, we worry about things such as which direction the market will go. We worry about whether or not we're going to have a win or a loss. We worry about how much money we're going to make. And that produces stress that we simply do not need. On the other hand, successful traders know that after they enter a trade, the outcome is totally uncertain and out of their control. And I have heard some people that I really admire and respect talk about, I think they kind of do a disservice to people when they talk about they know where the market's going or they knew to expect something. And the reality is nobody knows. That's not real. It gets a lot of clicks and a lot of views, and it's very interesting and very exciting, but nobody knows. And if they did know, why would they ever take a loss? The reality is anything can happen in any given trade. There's no need to stress or worry. Take your best probabilistic setup and then just sit back and watch it play out. So, what to do if you're struggling with this? Focus on your thoughts and beliefs. If your trading psychology, if your psychology as a trader is challenging you or presenting problems for you, what you want to do is focus on your thoughts and beliefs. And again, why is that? It's because your emotions are automatic. Your emotions happen whether you want them to happen or not. An emotional response is a physiological response within your body that you cannot control. It's going to happen whether you want it to happen or not. It can even happen when there is absolutely no possibility of a threat. So imagine if you watch a scary movie and you know it's not real, and yet when the boogeyman or whatever jumps out and you still get a startle, right? You cannot help that. You cannot stop that, because that is an automatic physiological response. It's part of being human, right? Now, of course, not everybody gets startled in movies because, like, my husband always knows when it's coming. I always fall for it. And the point is or another example is if you're driving and you have to slam on the brakes you will notice that you absolutely have a physiological response in your body. That's an emotional response. You cannot control it, you cannot stop it. Okay. It's there to serve a purpose and it's part of being human. So, in addition to recognizing that your thoughts and your beliefs are your point of access, meaning if your trading psychology is causing you trouble, focus your attention not on your emotions. That's all I ever hear traders talk about. There's somebody, I love his interviews. He gives the best interviews and he always asks about emotions. And that's really important and that's fine. But your emotions, he said in the interview I watched today, oh, everybody talks about should you control your emotions or accept your emotions? And it's kind of like you can't control your emotions. So of course you have to accept your emotions. But then what? Then what do you do? This is what you do. You focus on your thoughts and your beliefs. Your beliefs are kind of part of you, and you can change your beliefs, but they're kind of like more core, to yourself. But your thoughts are very malleable. You can change your thoughts very easily. Again, even if it's not genuine. Have you ever had a challenge or something that you did and you kind of talk to yourself and say, like, I'm imagining somebody riding a bike for the first time and you're saying, I can do it. I got this. I'm going to be okay. And they absolutely may not feel that in the moment wholeheartedly, but saying those things to themselves can be very, very positive and be very, very helpful. Another important, let's actually back up here. So rehearsal, practicing these things. How do you want to behave? How do you want to respond in stressful situations? So again, back to the mindset warm up. We rehearse. How are we gonna think, and how are we gonna handle our emotions and handle our body? We can rehearse that ahead of time. So just like you're preparing for a performance or a dance recital or something, or a sports game or whatever, you rehearse, you practice ahead of time. Okay, what am I going to be like? What am I going to do? Not only physically as an athlete, but mentally, what am I going to do? Just like that is true for traders. How are you going to keep yourself from losing your resilience in a stressful situation? Visualizing, huge piece of it, and finding a purpose. Why are you doing what you're doing, right? And then lastly, journaling. So journaling to me is something I talk about this all the time. I feel like a broken record. I'm not a diary keeper. I'm not a natural journaler. My journals are very, very basic, but they are super helpful. How I'm doing them now, which is 3 parts: safety of flight, which should almost always be none, right? Safety of flight are the really, really big errors that could jeopardize your account. So when you're saying none, 95% of the time, that's really positive and really, hey, don't do that. Reinforcing, sorry. Then your goods, what are you doing well? So sometimes my goods are basic. If I had a really bad day, Monday I had a pretty one of my worst days in my recent past, and my goods that I listed was I stopped trading for the day. Stopped trading for the day, right? So I walked away when it was done. I could have traded on another account, but I didn't. Okay. That's the only good I could come up with that day. Okay. So you always, always, always have to find a good, something that you did well. And typically you should have multiple goods, not just one. But some days they're harder to find, right? And then finally, others. Others are kind of a positive frame, a positive spin on the area that you would like to improve or what you could have done better. Again, framed in a positive way. We cannot hold ourselves to perfection. We cannot expect that we're going to nail every trade, do it perfectly. That's definitely not something that we're able to do. And so it's really important that we give ourselves grace and think realistically about what we're trying to do. Okay, couple more things here. Let me just pop through here. Let's talk about the habits of a successful trader. So I just talked about that. Um, Habits of a successful trader include using a stop loss, following a trading plan, and also having a trader plan. So again, those behavioral commitments that you make to yourself, such as walking away after two losers or three losers, or walking away after a certain amount of money lost, risking appropriately. Okay, super important. And accepting losses and focusing on a series of trades rather than one trade or two trades or four trades. You're looking, um, over a series of like 30 trades or 100 trades. That is what is important, because these strings of losers will come just like strings of winners will come. For me, when I have too many strings of winners, I tend to get a little bit overconfident and a little bit too, it changes things a little bit. So I like to think of it as a pendulum, right? I kind of go from a lot of wins to over swing to the other side and some losses, right? Hopefully you get to hang out in the middle somewhere, but those swings do happen. And then also focusing on the process versus the outcome. So it is very easy to focus on an outcome, right? Your end goal. It's easy to define, it's easy to think about that way. But instead of focusing on an outcome or an end goal, think about the process, focusing on really trading well, for example, or perhaps even the stepping stones that you have outlined for yourself in order to get to where you eventually want to go.